Very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's uLaw webinar. It's actually a very exciting webinar as it's the first in the year 2020. So I welcome you all and thank you for joining us this afternoon. So we're certainly starting us off with a bang in the new year with the Everything Practice Management webinar today. Today's webinar is accredited for 1.5 hours of professionalism credits in the province of Ontario, and it's been approved for 1 hour of professionalism credits in the provinces of British Columbia and New Brunswick. And the title, as you can clearly see, is Everything Practice Management. Okay, once again, this particular webinar is being recorded and will be available to you on uLaw's YouTube channel, which we welcome and request you to subscribe to get instant notifications of every new CPD that we deliver. But for those who want to review it again and ensure that you include this as part of your CPD, the title is Everything Practice Management. And we'll also make sure we type that in our chat window. And there you go. Please feel free to use the chat window at any given time to ask us any questions that you may have. Both myself and my support staff are available to take answers. We could either park them till the end of the session, or if it's an important question during the context of the presentation, I'll be more than happy to pause and answer that question. Okay? Please do help by muting your phone lines, and if you are using the computer audio and if you find any difficulties, there is a direct phone number, a local phone number that's been provided where we find the quality of the audio to be better. So please feel free to dial in if the computer audio quality sometimes, because of the internet bandwidth, is low. In Everything Practice Management, we specifically want to focus, and we wanted to do this first time, really the first thing in the year, so that you can certainly set these particular obligations, write this down, maybe set up your own KPIs, have your own goals for the upcoming 2020 year. These could be goals for your business growth. This could be goals for certain discipline that you want to bring into your business. This could be revenue goals. This could be reducing your business office expenses goals. This could be personal goals. As a business owner, you certainly want to set yourself time to rejuvenate, relax, and then get into your business with a bang. So whatever that goal may be, we found that this is a great time to set that and have a better appreciation for what is expected out of you as a legal professional in this industry, as a professional, those professional obligations. And we've taken I would say the top 7 professional obligations when we pretty much encapsulated many different aspects that the law societies talk about as professional obligations that you have to keep in mind as you practice your business. Okay, so we're going to start off, of course, as you can see, from client intake, the whole 9 years of intaking the client, delivering key service capabilities, and being very clear in both the correspondence and the message of those service obligations. And then moving along to the obligations of how you manage your matters or your file. We're then going to talk about financial management, one of the important bookkeeping documents that you as a professional have to keep in mind and have to deliver both during an audit as well as when it's mandated on a monthly basis for you to generate certain set of documents that you are required to produce. Okay, so we're going to talk about those specific aspects of your obligation. We'll talk about financial management, both from a law society's perspective as well as a CRA standpoint of what you're expected to deliver. Business management, which of course, again, comes away from that CRA or a revenue agency perspective. How do you manage your business to be successful? Business management includes having a plan of action for how you're going to keep the lights on in your business. How are you going to manage the ever-growing expenses of running your business and growing your business? What is your plan to expand both the resources required as well as the services that you can offer your public or individual companies as a legal professional, and of course the documents that surround and extend that particular obligation. Okay, and the last three really comes down to a bit of a personal management. That's around professionalism management or professional management, things such as the CPD, the obligations that you have for both substantial and professional CPD hours that you are required to participate and report. So you being here first thing in the month of the new year is a great starting point because you do collect CPD credits that you can report into your individual law society portals. We'll also talk about some of the other professional management obligations that the law society highlights and talks about in further detail. Time and personal management. Of course, there are a lot of material out there on the internet that you can utilize to substantiate and build that discipline, but we're really going to talk about some of the important aspects when it touches your legal business. How specifically does time management affect the legal business? Do you capture pro bono? Do you capture those non-billable hours? How are you capturing your top paying customers? Where are you spending your non-billable hours? So how are you managing time as it relates to how you put that time towards your legal business? And last but not the least, of course, Law Society does look out for you as a company, as a business, as an individual, and as a professional representing that prestigious profession, and hence does highlight some important aspects to keep in mind, such as taking time away to, as I mentioned earlier, to bring that energy back into the business, to rejuvenate yourself, and also talks about other aspects of personal management that makes it better for you to not feel stressed about running this business. And one such thing that we spoke about earlier is setting those goals. Every time in the new year, if you can set yourself certain personal goals as well as certain ambitious business goals, it's easier for you to manage and track how you're performing against those goals, right? So always a great idea to set those goals early so that you can now take the appropriate right steps towards achieving those goals. So 7 different professional obligations, and we're definitely going to take the next 15 minutes or so to cover them all. Once again, today's webinar is titled Everything Practice Management. I'm just going to cover this one last time. Everything Practice Management and its professionalism CPD credits, 1.5 hours in the province of Ontario, 1 hour in the provinces of British Columbia and New Brunswick. So for all our friends joining us from these 3 provinces, you are able to take this title, put it into your Law Society portal, and utilize it against those CPD hours. And for our friends joining us from other provinces, we have applied for the CPD credits, and we hope to have it soon. As soon as we get those, we'll make sure that we inform you of that. Starting with the professional obligations, we're going to start with the client intake, service, and communication. Of course, I've covered this particular topic many times in the past, but it's I have to say that every time I talk about the client intake, service, communication, whether it's during my webinar or when I'm teaching at a college or when it's in a in-person seminar, it's always interesting because of the changing times. I've spoken about client intake when it was a simple document or a form that used to be submitted in an office so that you can understand that client's information, process that information, to today's day and age where that intake form is readily available on a legal professional's website, making just so much more easier for you as a business owner to right away respond to that intake process, right? So technology has certainly evolved to alleviate any pain point of manual interventions that was otherwise required just maybe a few years back for this particular process. So always it's a very interesting subject to talk about. But from a professional obligation, the obligations and the essence of that haven't necessarily changed. Of course, the efficiencies and the operational efficiencies that you can bring to meet those obligations have changed to your own advantage, and it's important that you appreciate what those technological changes are so that you can bring those operational efficiencies. We're going to talk briefly about that as well, but let's cover the top 5 or 6 professional obligations to begin with. First and foremost, it's important, of course, to have a process to collect as much as data about a particular client, a prospective client or a ghost client, someone who is wanting for you to work with them on a specific matter. A detailed recording of calls and consultations. So let's say you have taken that client intake, you have a process of inputting that into your practice management or legal accounting system. Almost the next step is either you set up a time with this client, whether yourself or whether it's your office staff who's doing that. You set up a particular time, whether it's a 15-minute consultation, phone call, or if it's going to be a detailed in-person meeting, whatever that may be. It's important that you have a process to record in as detail as possible that particular call and consultation that you had with your client. Simple things, of course, as the first name, last name, important data points such as source of contact, really trying to understand how did this particular prospective client learn about your business. Was it through Google My Business? Was it through a review search? Was this looking at your Google Maps? Was this a referral? Was this a law society referral, a friend referral? Of course, utilizing that data point allows you to be prepared to generate law society documents such as source of contact. Other pieces of information, such as an address or a correspondence address, and in certain cases, if possible, a communication number, a phone number, email, etc. Now, as soon as you've taken that initial information, client intake, there's 2 ways of doing this. You can do this the manual way of going through each and every record that you have in your system, or you could actually use a legal accounting or practice management system that can pretty much automate the next step, which is intaking the client and doing a thorough conflict check on that particular client's information. Now, the conflict check is a very critical first step before you can actually create a file and a matter and move forward with representing that particular client. The conflict check gives you the confidence that really there aren't much of a conflict, as the name says, in representing this client. Have you dealt with this client in the past? Have you dealt with this client in a totally different matter? Having those pieces of information readily available makes you, the legal professional and the business professional, make informed decisions. Now, you may decide to still move forward, and you may have your reasons, and it's important from a law society standpoint that you clearly articulate and document what those reasons are. If there are no conflicts, of course, you're still required to document it in a conflict search report. So one is to actually do the conflict search and validate that there are no conflicts, or if there are any, totally being aware of what those are. And the next step from a professional obligation is to generate that law society report called a conflict search report. And the templates are definitely available, and within products like uLaw, it's built in, making it easier for you to be compliant every step of the way. Now, once you actually have completed that conflict check, then, of course, you have the full confidence of moving forward with creating a file. We're, of course, going to come into file management in our next slide share, but once you have created the matter, there are certain obligations that the Law Society talks about. Determining the collateral for fees. So making it very evident and clear, depending on the nature and the matter of the scope, being very clear as a legal professional to tell your client that for the specific matter that you're going to be representing her or him, or it could be a business entity, what is your set out fee? What are you going to charge them, if at all you're going to charge them, right? If you're going to be doing this pro bono, then you still need to be very, very clear in articulating that in what is called as either an engagement letter or a retainer letter. Again, depending on the financial vehicle that you choose to use in dealing with the fees. If you or your firm deals with trust money, where you're accepting retainers, and of course you have the obligation of ensuring that trust funds are not misappropriated, they're managed and maintained well. You have all the record keeping of all the audit trails that happens within a trust account, because that's part of your reconciliation, your trust ledgers and journals that the Law Society is going to ask you for. So determining the collateral for fees is really the first step in the financial management component of your entire business, right? So important things to keep in mind when you draft that retainer letter. Things such as, what is your retainer to begin with? Does that retainer include your provincial taxes? Does that retainer include disbursements that you may incur? Or are you going to be clearly telling your client that if there are any disbursements, you're going to be paying out of your general account, right? And then drawing money out of trust from there. Or are you just going to pay for these disbursements right off the trust account? So, of course, very important for you to first consider the legal fees. How much are you going to charge for this? By the hour, flat rate, combination, contingency fees, whatever is maybe based on the situation. And then what are the expenses related to managing that file? Disbursements, so the client-related expenses, otherwise known as disbursements. How is that going to be managed for the specific file or matter? Keep in mind that everything is very specific to a file, and the collateral for fees and retainer letter would, of course, vary. Even if it's for the same client, it would vary from matter to matter, okay? Now, once you've decided that, you've been very clear through that retainer letter, and have, of course, your client review it, either online or you can send them a document, email it to them, have them review it, and once they're happy, they're, of course, going to sign it, followed by actually paying you, if there's a retainer, paying you that retainer in an agreeable transactional format, okay? So you may be accepting checks. The Law Society allows you to accept up to $7,500 if in cash into trust account, nothing more than that. Or if today's modern professionals accept trust money through credit cards. So integrated payment gateways through the systems can help automate intake of those retainers as well. That way you're not waiting for bounce checks and all the other issues that can start to lead from there. So moving on to our next specific obligation is ensuring you as a legal professional are depositing that retainer into your trust account. And most importantly, providing a receipt to your client, thanking them for that payment, and having it written in a formalized document through that receipt, accepting that you have received it. For in the case where they gave you a check and the check actually bounced, you, of course, will not provide a retainer receipt prior to completely accepting. That's one other challenge that we had seen with certain legal professionals that we'd worked with, where they would, of course, take the leap of faith, take the check, give the retainer receipt. It's something that you shouldn't do because you want to safeguard yourself as well. So, of course, make sure that, and that's why accepting retainers through a credit card helps, because you can ensure the money is in your bank right away, so that you can confidently provide them that retainer receipt. Okay? So you've done your conflict check, you've done the intake of the client, you've done your conflict checks, you've created that file, you've signed up the retainer agreement with the collateral for fees being determined, and every party being very clear about that. And then if there's a retainer involved, ensuring that you're depositing it, making sure it's deposited in your bank and it's available, and then providing a receipt for that retainer. Of course, many of you who have joined us in this webinar today are doing this day to day. So really the question is, how can you improve this process? What are the operational efficiencies that you can build into this whole business of yours to help automate At the same time, make sure that it's a very transparent process for both yourself, your firm, your employees, and more importantly, for the client. And in addition, providing this business automation, if you can also automatically ensure that the Law Society's guidelines and the compliance guidelines are met, then it's really a double whammy. Now, the last aspect is something the Law Society talks in further detail, but we're going to kind of keep it crisp given the time that we have for today's webinar. It really is about, yes, it's fine and dandy if everything is great, you have a perfect situation where there's a client, there's no conflict, or you've dealt with the conflict, they've paid you, etc. Now, of course, instances where you need room in that retainer letter to for an exit. Let's call it that. The exit is really the ability for you to non-engage with that client. And of course, it's a two-way street, ensuring that there's room for an exit either initiated by yourself or initiated by your client. So for example, you may later find out there's a particular situation where the client's not paying you on time, the checks are bouncing, so there could be many different reasons that you lay out in your retainer letter, saying you as the legal professional have the right to non-engage this particular client if more than 2 checks have bounced. Maybe that's the clause. So that's one exit criteria. Likewise, you probably want to put in a line that protects your client too, because then it's very prudent, very transparent, and your customers are going to appreciate that transparency, which is they, as the client, have the right with a written notice of such and such time period to be able to non-engage with you as a legal professional. And if that were to happen, it is important that you, as a firm, have the right documentation to provide that in written statement. So you clearly then state that you as a legal firm no more have the obligation, and through this letter, you're actually going to non-engage with this particular client. And moving forward, since that particular date when that non-engagement letter was transactioned, your firm does not have any obligations to take care of that specific subject matter or scope of that matter for which the retainer agreement may have been discussed. So from a client intake, service, and communication, here are the top 5 things that you may want to keep in mind. These are processes that you're already dealing with, in which case the thing to improve upon would be the operational efficiencies of how you generate it. How soon do you generate the receipt? How do you intake that client? Is it, if there is a paper-based, manual-based process, can you afford it? If you're only getting one client every 6 months and you're happy with that because you make enough money with that one client, of course, then that opens various other aspects of efficiencies that you can manage. But from a client intake, if you're going to be dealing with multiple clients in a day, then if you can build certain operational efficiencies to help automate some of these tasks, then you're actually saving yourself time and money. Okay? Of course, when you're considering that retainer agreement, which is really your first window into a professional relationship that you're signing up with that client, some important aspects that you want to keep in mind. What are the important components that go into that retainer letter? Or it could otherwise be called an engagement letter, even if there's not a retainer. So let's say you agree upon where it's a leap of faith, there is no retainer, you're just going to be billing them as you go, and you expect them to make those payments. Maybe it's someone you know. Then it's, of course, called an engagement letter. Important things to consider. Definitely define the nature and scope of matter. Is this a family law? Is this a divorce separation? Is this a DUI? Is this a criminal matter, DUI? Or it could be distracted driving, right? This could be a small claims matter, slip and fall, a fence issue. This could be a accident benefits. What is the nature and scope of that particular matter? Defining that gives you 2 advantages. One, it's very clear in the document. And second, you as the legal firm have a better appreciation for the types of practice areas where you're actually bringing new clients and more revenue. Okay, so it gives you the power of the data to make informed decisions about your business too. Defining client responsibilities. So one is for you to provide enough information about your legal firm, how best you plan to serve this particular client's interest and this particular matter's interest, but it's all equally important that you have the client responsibilities drafted. We mentioned it. Making payments within 15 days, within net 30, ensuring that the retainers are topped up every time it reaches a certain number. We have clients who have retainer agreements which states that any time a retainer drops below $500, that is expected to be topped up to $1,000. Okay, so there could be many different types of retainer agreements where client responsibilities are clearly articulated. Scheduling and course of representation, method and frequency of communication. How do you plan to correspond with this client? What is the agreed upon channel, if you will, of how you want to correspond? Is it email, phone, WhatsApp for business, text? What is the agreed upon method and frequency of communication? And of course, with power comes responsibility, so of course letting them know what the risks are of each of those channels through which you correspond. Okay. And termination details, as we mentioned, non-engagement, your route for exit. So 5 things to keep in mind as really the first step in dealing with the client as part of that client intake, service, and communication. And we spoke about creating that matter or file. The Law Society does talk about certain key aspects to keep in mind and some obligations that are required for you to manage around file management. Okay? And there's certainly a method to the madness. First and foremost, we talk about having a checklist of important things that you want to keep in mind as you create that file. Checklist such that it can be divided based on the nature and scope of matter too. But we have clients who, of course, have a checklist such as every time there's a new file, making sure that there's a scanned driver's license of that client. So for client validation, if this is truly that person or that business entity that showed up. So driver's license, passport. So the checklist really is, do I have a driver's license that validates the client? Do I have a retainer letter signed? Perfect. It's a signed document. Do I have a receipt of that retainer that they was accepted? Perfect. So really building yourself that checklist. You can do that today on a notepad and then implement it into your system of record. If you're doing this manually, then of course build it in an Excel sheet. And then with every file, make sure that you're checking off those boxes of that checklist that you have for file management. Okay? And this could end with a statement of activity as the final document in that particular file. So maybe you have a checklist which says, give or take for a small claims matter, there are about 8 to 10 different documents that have to be there, or 5 or 10 checklist items that need to be checked off for you to be completely satisfied with the compliance nature of that file management. Confirmation of conflict check, we mentioned that. It could be one of the checklists, right? Right up in the alley, you could have, here's my driver's license. Do I have a conflict screening report? And then, what's the retainer agreement, right? Separate files for each and every matter. We've discussed this many times, and I repeat this, that even if it's with the same client, especially if you're doing this in a manual way, if you're using systems today, such as uLaw or others in the industry, every system gives you a separate file number for every file or matter that you create, even if it's for the same client. But if you're doing this a manual way today, then of course you should consider your options of systems that are available by doing your due diligence search, talking to friends, figuring out what a modern system can give you as time savers. But if you're still continuing to do this manually, please make sure that you have a process to label the nomenclature of a file to be unique and something that can be chronologically searched. So if you're searching for a name, you should be able to bring up that file. If you're searching for a file number, you should be able to bring up that file. If you're searching for any parties involved, it should still bring up that file. So it makes it easier for you to search for something faster and from various different angles and touch points that the file has. Okay? And why do they even talk about that as an obligation? Because we often have heard, and there are enough documents and reports that suggest that the law firm spends quite a bit of time searching up for information. And searching up for file and client information are top two in one of the searches that they do. Apart from, searching for key piece of information, system of record, but as little as a file. And if you do not have a process, or if it's a manual system that needs constant reminders, then especially if you're dealing with 10 or 20, 30 matters a month, they all add up, right? So very important that you're able to chronologically and quickly search for files. Because that's an obligation, because if you're going to be delaying in how you represent that client, of course, that makes the profession look bad, as you are certainly a very proud representation of that profession. File management. So again, we spoke about the checklist, but keeping a personal record of all the interactions, email. Today's day and age, you can actually have all of the emails synced up. You can have all the documents synced up all under the same umbrella of that file management. And you can also ensure that it's properly organized and cross-indexed. And cross-indexed is really where I spoke about, where you should be able to search for a client from various different aspects. All right, so we spoke about client intake, and then we kind of spoke briefly about file management, with the highlight really being on having a checklist for every file management, for every file or matter, making sure you're checking off that checklist, making sure you have all the documents and the correspondence centrally available for you to quickly refer, and having a process, especially if you're doing this manually, to cross-index and quickly search for file information. Okay? Quick and easy. And now we move on to the financial management as the third professional obligation, a very important one of that to keep in mind. And as I mentioned earlier, this starts the minute you accept and sign off that retainer letter and accept that retainer. Okay? So first step first, of course, you're going to ensure that there's a proper collateral determined or fee determined for that particular file. An important segue of that fee structure is an important aspect of how you actually make money pragmatically. And that is the cycle of your invoice or bill that you're going to generate. And that's once we've established how you're going to charge them, it's equally important that now you've established the frequency of how you charge them, right? What's the rate? How much are you going to charge them? Then the other aspect is how often are you going to be generating those bills? Now, some matters have, again, this all comes down to nature, scope, and the specific uniqueness of that matter, your business style, the advantages of working with your firm, etc., right? But certain matters, especially if they're short-lived and if they're flat rate, it could be just a single invoice that is generated at the end of the matter. So my limited experience, I've seen POA matters just having a single invoice at the end of it. Right? There aren't any iterative aspects of invoicing to a POA matter. But if you look at a total contrast of a criminal matter that lasts for many years, there are going to be certain quick bursts of invoices based on a specific goal, a specific timeline, could be a certain outcome, time period, expenses. So it all comes down to what has been detailed and agreed upon in the retainer letter. But nevertheless, it's very important for you to keep in mind as you work with every client and matter what that invoice schedule looks like. how often do I generate my disbursements? Especially if you're dealing with corporate law, if you're dealing with the business and you're representing that business, or could be where you're representing another paralegal firm and your client is actually a business entity. And if you're on a retainer, on a monthly retainer, you may say, I'm going to be submitting timesheets, or I'm going to submit dockets, I'm going to submit whatever is required for you to submit on a scheduled basis every week. You're going to accumulate all the work done. Every month, you're going to accumulate all the dockets that you've delivered. And then you may separate out disbursements. So there's so many different unique situations when it comes to schedule of invoices. And it starts at that you be very clear about what those obligations are to your client and ensure that you stick to that plan when you generate those invoices. Because how you plan to generate invoices results in how you actually receive payment, and how you receive payment results in the time period in which you receive it, so that when you reconcile your accounts, you know that within that time period is when you have to reconcile. So if you've generated a $500 bill or a $565 bill, and you have 15 days to receive that payment, and you receive it on the 29th, maybe you wait for that payment to reconcile your month of January. But if you only received it on the 2nd of February, you would have already reconciled the month of Jan, and hence that payment that you received may actually reflect in the reconciliation in the month of February. So, as subtle as it may seem, ensuring that the invoice schedule is planned and is met makes it easier for you to also plan your business. Important that you also track once you've generated an invoice. Very, very important, especially if you're a solo practitioner or a small law firm, legal firm, that you have a process to track the invoice balances. Who owes you how much and within what time period? Because that also allows you to manage your business for all the expenses that are certainly going out of your bank accounts. Right? So systematic tracking of payments and overpayments, or payment people who are not paying you on time. Very important. Now, if you're not paying disbursements out of your trust account, and if you're going to be paying out of your general account, which is where you're paying in advance and then recouping or recovering that money through an invoice, then it's very important as a financial management component that you manage all the receipts of these disbursements that you have incurred on behalf of your client. So during an audit, or even when your client wants to know and wants you to substantiate that particular disbursement through an invoice that you've raised, it's equally important that you manage these receipts either on the cloud, or you can actually have a folder in your MacBook, your Windows, your laptop, or just have a manila folder where you store all these receipts. Whatever is comfortable with your style. Keep in mind, this is 2020, and the more automation you can help yourself with, the more time and money you're going to save yourself, right? So keeping a track of all the receipts for disbursements, very important component, an obligation rather, of that financial management. Maintaining bank statements of books, especially canceled checks. Someone gave you a check and it did not pass. Bounce checks. Very important to keep all of that as a record so that you can show for it. Now, we spoke about trust management, which is actually a segue of the financial management. So if you do have a trust account, it's very important that, as per the Law Society's expectations, that you do a trust reconciliation at least on a monthly basis. And the recommendation is almost the end of the month for the last month that passed. The trust reconciliation, of course, is a way for you to match all the trust transactions, the ins and outs out of a trust account that you have recorded in your bookkeeping system, whether it's automated or paper-based, does not matter, and comparing that with what the bank statement says, the ins and outs out of the actual bank for that particular trust account. Okay? And besides that, of course, you're going to do a listing of all of your outstanding trust client listing of which client has provided how much and how much more of that trust amount is still remaining in their account for that particular file. Okay? So generating the reconciliation statement is key. After the reconciliation statement, you also have trust ledgers by client of the ins and outs for a specific file for each client. Just a quick question about so this particular webinar has been approved for 1.5 hours of professionalism credits. And I think our support staff may have got confused with the 1.5 hours, so it's not substantiated. So this is professionalism. uLaw, it's only in this year in 2020 that we're going to actually be bringing up more substantive CPD credits. So this particular webinar, I repeat, and I've mentioned this earlier too, for those who joined us a bit late, it's 1.5 hours of professionalism credits in the province of Ontario, 1 hour in British Columbia, and 1 hour in New Brunswick. So after the trust ledgers and journals, you then have the financial documents that you need to generate as a business owner. So these are important things such as income statement, expense books, expense statements, your annual budget. All of that is a combination of law society documents as well as documents that are related to business management. Okay? Perfect. So we spoke about this briefly, but most importantly, the trust reconciliation document, followed by your trust ledger, trust receipts journal, and trust disbursements journal. Okay? The top 5 documents that you would need from a trust angle. The same thing would repeat for general. You do a general reconciliation of course, all the general accounts that you have. So if you have a general account, you have a TD or any other bank credit card or Visa credit card, could be a general account. You reconcile those accounts as well. And there are certainly ledgers, journals for the general account as well. So we've spoken about, let me just do a quick recap. We've spoken about the client intake, how you move on to managing a file, the obligations there, and we just finished talking about the financial management, the key documents including reconciliation, journals, and ledgers for both trust and general. There are, of course, many other specific law society documents such as expense book, jurisdictional documents such as Form 9A that are very important to keep in mind. Now we move on from the financial management aspect of it to the business management. So from a business management, the Law Society talks about you as a business owner. And I think this is a lot to do with highlighting for some of the new entrepreneurs who are just getting started to be completely aware of all the obligations that it takes to run a business and the obligations that you have to manage your business. Because if you do not plan to succeed, then many a times it results, especially if you're starting a solo practice, then of course it sometimes becomes overwhelming when reality and expenses start to hit you, right? So the business obligation or business management angle of the obligation is really to help you prepare yourself to be a successful business owner who delivers legal services, right? The Law Society definitely asks you to make your own judgment of what's best in terms of software or tools that can help you and your firm. Tools of various natures. Of course, there is a legal accounting practice management software that's required. Certain types of businesses require certain other softwares to run their business. You need a secure email channel or a correspondence channel that you probably have to invest in. If you're looking for cloud storage, then those are, you of course have various different options in today's day and context for you to look at. Even if you're someone who's seasoned, these are things that are constantly evolving, and hence it always gives you a new opportunity to look at these things in a totally different light. Okay? So Law Society certainly encourages you to discover tools and software for the modern day professional to help you automate and look at operational efficiencies. Definitely talks about being very cognizant of the security component of anything that you do, especially because you're dealing with client information. It's certainly an obligation for you to do all the right things that you can do, to ask all the right questions to all the vendors that you're dealing with about their security policies. How do they manage client data? Where are your data servers located? How do you manage hacks? How do you ensure that the data is protected? What happens if there's a particular server that fails? What is the uptime, right? So every software company would certainly have terms and conditions and policies around how they manage and what they offer you as a business. So ensuring that you are completely aware of the risk reward and the security components of your data management, very critical. Even if you're not dealing with cloud-based companies, if you're just going to be doing this completely yourself using a machine, could be PC-based, MacBook, let's say it's not on the cloud, it's all in that one device, then how do you manage hacks, malware? What happens if your laptop crashes? Do you have a plan for backup, right? How much are you paying for it? Are you going to be hiring your own staff who would manage it? So there's many aspects to security that you want to be completely aware of before you start to utilize those. If you're going to be using mobile devices, so today's day and age, once again, has become stable state to be using mobile devices, whether you're sending emails, texts, messages, even invoices, docketing your effort. There's so many different things that are done from the mobile. Again, being completely aware of the risk reward and the robustness of utilizing these modern technologies. How do you manage your phone system? Okay, are you going to let your client call you on a landline, leave a message if you're not in the office, or today's modern legal professional is very mobile. In fact, many of them do not even have a specific brick-and-mortar office. They're having a mobile office where they actually meet at certain business centers. And if that is the case, do you carry with yourself a wipe phone, or do you provide your cell phone as a business phone? So ensuring that you're completely aware that you're investing in the right tools based on your style and approach towards this business. Okay? So we move on to the professional management, where the Law Society definitely talks about completing the required CPD hours, that is the continued professional development hours, both from a substantial as well as a professional nature. I believe it's 3 hours for professionalism hours, and we at uLaw actually provide close to at least 12 to 13 hours of professionalism CPD hours a year. So definitely more than what you as a professional need in a year. And we're looking to update and come up with newer pieces of subjects that we can cover these in. But yes, you being here is a great first step in meeting these obligations. And of course, having webinars are great, but we also recommend that you be in person to attend seminars, because that gives you the ability to meet others who are on the same boat, allows you to talk to these professionals who could be your colleagues. Sometimes you could be working together on matters. So that really comes down to how you can be part of associations, memberships. It's not mandatory, certainly not. None of this really is, but it's a guideline, and there are certain obligations, of course, like the CPD hours. How you accomplish it is certainly left to you, but they certainly do recommend and highlight the benefits of being part of a collaborative or a membership that has common goals and challenges. Reviewing legislative laws and case laws and being aware of the constant changes that are happening, whether as simple as having the latest court forms. with uLaw, we tend to update our automated quote forms 2 to 3 weeks as soon as we get the new form, or if you're going to be doing this manually, ensuring that you're downloading the most recent form from the court website. As subtle things like that, to ensuring that you're reviewing legislative case laws, being aware of certain jurisdictional requirements such as Form 9A, that is specifically in Ontario, if you're transferring funds from an online trust account into an online general account, anytime you're transferring money out of a trust account through an online channel, then they require you to fill out a document called the Form 9A. Okay? Little things like that. And last but not the least, definitely very important in today's day and age, is certainly reviewing the most recent updated professional conduct guideline. Okay? So the Law Society of Ontario has actually recently published an updated professional conduct guideline. Other provinces have them in their individual websites. We highly encourage you to go review them and be thoroughly aware of your obligations of managing and maintaining a certain level of decorum, as well as ensuring that the conduct guidelines are met. And we come down to kind of the last two, professional obligations. And as I mentioned earlier, we're no expert in talking about time management. You, of course, have a lot of self-help books and webinars and seminars. Certainly helps for you to reiterate those Stephen Coveys of the world, how you can effectively manage time, whether it's John Tash or whatever is the best way for you to learn time management. I think it's great if you can actually invest in important seminars and webinars so that you're able to build that time management capacity and the discipline so that you can take more out of what you already have. But we've tried to encapsulate 3 important components really from a legal standpoint that you may want to keep in mind as you manage time. It's not so much how you manage it, as really do you have a plan for tracking, reporting, and then reflecting on certain key components of time management. And one is to ensure that for anything and everything you do, especially given the craziness that surrounds you as a legal professional, the need to be at, 3 different places at 4 different times, the need to do many different tasks, the need to multitask between being a legal professional to a business owner, to being a parent, or to being a person managing your own personal time. So there's many different avatars that you have to take, multitask. So certainly having a to-do list, a checklist, as I mentioned, whether it's a file-based checklist, whether it's a client checklist, whether it's a financial management checklist, both for Law Society guidelines, compliance, as well as financial checklist for your own business, a checklist for time management in terms of your schedule for court. So certainly then moving along to having what we call as calendaring system, making sure you're certainly aware of where you should be on a given day, especially if you have to visit court, using systems, tools. You can use your own phone, including uLaw and other products have their own calendaring system that remind you of where you should be. Managing of active files. So this is a very important component, and we've stressed upon this many times, and it stays true even after this presentation has now lasted several years. Managing and focusing on your active files is one of the best ways that you can save time. And what that really means is ensuring that you have a logical closure or a process for a logical closure of a matter. So you should never leave a matter hanging beyond where it should go. If this is a simple matter that needs to be done in 3 months, find every way possible, whatever the circumstance, to close that matter. Of course, if this is a criminal matter or something like that, that by nature takes that long, still have a process to constantly, then of course it's an active file, but then you always revisit it in a specific cycle. But if it's a matter that's closed and it's done, it really does not need your attention. Your attention needs to be on the current active matters and clients. So please do have a process to manage and have your focus laser sharp on the active files. And last but not the least, we certainly want to remind you to constantly keep thinking if you are providing pro bono, whether it's a differentiator, whether it's a favor, whether it's something that you do as an individual, a business firm, or maybe it's just part of the management of the file itself. Please do keep a tab on the non-billable time that you spend. If you've got 8 hours, of course you spend more than 8 hours, but let's just say that's 8 hours. Really keeping a tab on those non-billable activities, those pro bono hours, is something that we find you can help yourself with to, again, as I mentioned, track it, measure it, and reflect upon it. And believe it or not, the Law Society talks quite a bit about this, and you can actually review this under the bookkeeping guidelines for individual jurisdictions. It's a pretty elaborate document. The Law Society certainly does talk about the need for personal management, and that is you as an individual having the satisfaction with the practice that you're dealing with. As I said, now is a great time to set new goals. What's happened has happened, and 2019 has passed, and you're now into this new year, and this is a great year to start your ambitious goals, plan ahead, think positive, and really be happy with what you have and the power that we have where we are, because there's, of course, always certain less fortunate individuals in this world that we can always empathize and, of course, feel that we're at a better place than some of the others. But from a legal standpoint, from a practice standpoint, and you certainly want to feel happy about doing it, because you, of course, are a daredevil. You've come to this business for a specific reason. You all have your own powerful story that has motivated you to become a legal professional, right? But now that you're here, how can you make the most of it? How can you plan to be successful? And how can you be happy doing what you have to do? So we talked about satisfaction with the practice, enjoying what you do with your practice, almost like, with the talk about smooth riding on rough waves. Ensuring that you plan for growth and success. So growth just does not happen automatically. It's not a subliminal action unless you have a plan. So very important that you have the right tools. Going back to those 3 words I often talk about, have a way to track it, measure it, and reflect upon it. And when I say reflect, let us say that you're doing really well in a specific area of practice. You, of course, need a way to define it and see it constantly. So you're doing really well in small claims. You really want to understand the science behind it and the data that gives you that satisfaction. The reason why you're good at small claims is because this is what you do. You're really good at calendaring. You're really good at court, on time. It gives you a flat rate, so you're strategically priced probably. Maybe you're in a specific geographical location where these files happen more. So that's more like a POA situation where we found many legal professionals say that to be in this particular location, unfortunately, does lead to quite a bit of accidents and hence lead to a lot of clients. We've heard that. So whatever that method to the madness may be, you certainly need to have a plan and a strategy for growth. So growth does not happen automatically. It needs to be planned. And when planned and when you actually achieve and when you move closer towards that growth, that's when you're going to get the confidence that if I repeat and amplify my effort, I'm going to grow further. Okay? And that's why you need the tools to help you with that. Whether it's a manual process and tools such as Excel sheets, or if it's an automated system like a legal accounting system, whatever it may be, totally left to your specific situation. But please do take advantage of being a modern-day legal professional. Recording time spent at work, of course, we spoke about billable and non-billable hours, and taking a vacation. They stress upon how important it is to declutter yourself, declutter your mind, take a break, and then come back with much rejuvenation. And last but not the least, and we've spoken about this, is again, enjoy what you're doing despite of all the different craziness that happens around you, and then ensure that there's a proper work-life balance and a proper way of addressing stress. So when you plan for certain things, there's an answer to manage stress. If you have not reconciled for 8 months, then of course it's going to add to your stress. So it's not going to go away by not thinking about it. It's going to go away when you think about it and reflect on it and take action on it. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I have to say that, again, at that particular time, you're given 2 options, either to start to build a discipline from the next month onwards to do the reconciliation, get help, of course, to help reconciling those 8 months of work, which will cost you time and money, time or money sometimes. So, long story short, enjoy what you're doing, have enough time for your personal space, and be happy with what you have, and plan for growth and success. And of course, we talk about having the right tools, because the cost of ownership, the compliance nature, the CRA components of it, and today's modern practitioner needs to be anywhere at any given time with access to all their information using any device. So there's a lot of complexity and a lot of expectation from your customers as to how you serve them. They're expecting answers faster, they're expecting answers more digitally, and hence improving upon those expectations is going to set yourself for success. So with that, with another 5-6 minutes remaining in today's webinar, I would close out today's webinar to quickly reflect upon today's webinar's subject, which is the Everything Practice Management, accredited for 1.5 hours of professional CPD credits in the province of Ontario, and 1 hour of professionalism CPD credits in the province of British Columbia and New Brunswick. And the 7 important professional obligations that we covered include client intake, service, and communication. We spoke about how you can intake your client, ensure that you're communicating the obligations, the service levels, creating a file, a structured management, including a checklist for the file management, financial management, ensuring that your collateral for fees, your different invoice schedules, generating and accepting payments in different methods and reporting them is important. Business management, your obligation to make sure that you have all the right tools to respond to the ever-growing needs of today's customer. Professional management of you individually as a legal professional, having those CPD credits, being part of memberships, understanding today's ever-changing case laws and the ecosystem around you, and of course, time and personal management so that you're comfortable, confident, and happy with your situation, and you have a plan for growth and success. Today's webinar is being recorded and actually will be available for you to review on our YouTube channel, and we welcome you to subscribe to uLawPractice on our YouTube channel. Of course, everyone's saying that, so I have to say it, but it's certainly a pretty cool feature because anytime we update our YouTube channel with a new video, we tag it with a CPD label on it. So if you're actually looking out for CPD sessions, it's just going to be available to you readily on your mobile devices. Okay? So thank you once again for everyone who joined me in this particular webinar. I will open up the floor, of course, if you have any specific questions regarding today's webinar or how you should access it at a later time. Thank you.